You have seen that we were using square brackets with arrays in many situations. There are three different ways, in fact, to use square brackets with an array. They can be used first in the declaration, so with a data type when declaring an array, either a primitive types or user-defined class. So this is one way to use square brackets in the declaration of the base type. But the use of these square brackets in the declaration does not allocate any memory for the array. As an example here, pressure. So when you define integer with empty square brackets with the pressure without using new, then we are not allocating any space in the memory for the array. Square brackets also used to determine the size of the array. So this is the second way of using square brackets. When you want to allocate space in the memory for the array, then you use between square brackets the size of the array to allocate in the memory. So this declaration now allocates memory for the array pressure of 100 integers. Finally, they can be used to name an index value of the array. After you declare an array and after you allocate space in the array, then if you want to go to individual elements in the array, you use square brackets. And once you use square brackets, then it is called an index variable. Notice how we are using it. We are writing the name of the array. Between square brackets, we put the index of this element inside the array. After knowing how to declare an array and how to allocate space in the memory for the array, let us see how we can use the array. Let us give some terminologies to the components of the array. Now, when you mention only the name of the array, then you can think of the name of the array as a collection of variables. It is not a single variable that you can deal with it as a regular or ordinary variable. Therefore, it is illegal to use the name of the array in some statements. For example, you cannot simply print the array elements by using a single print statement. This is illegal. Also, it is illegal to store a single value to the whole array. Also, you cannot compare the whole array by a single element and by saying that if temperature is greater than 0. In conclusion, when you declare an array and allocate space in the memory for this array, then the name represents only a reference to the collection of the variables allocated for this array. The next terminology is what we write between square brackets. Remember that square brackets can be used in three different ways. The first way, when we declare the array, so we use it with the base type of the array. The second way to use brackets is to allocate space in the memory. Between square brackets, we determine the size. And now the third way to use square brackets as an index. So whatever we write between square brackets will be the index. That means the location inside the array, where this element is located. There is another terminology for the index. It is called a subscript. In Java, the index must be an integer, and you already know that it should always start with 0, and it should never exceed the size of the array, even not equal to the size of the array. So when you allocate, let's say, 100 elements for an array of type double, then you cannot save into the location 100. You can save into the locations 0 up to 99. So what are the options or possible indices we could have for arrays? For indices, we could have three options. Either the index is a constant, or the index is a variable, like this example now, you see it in front of you, or it can be an expression, but the result of this expression should be an integer. Let's take an example for each of these options. This is the first example for the first option. See that the index is a constant. So we are referring to location 3 of the array temperature. Now the second option of an index, we are using a variable which is an integer variable for the index. Depends on what is the value of I. The value of I will determine the location of the element inside the array. So this is an example of an integer variable index. The third option is that the index is an integer expression. You must put an integer expression so that the result is integer because a location must be an integer. Hence, you can use any expression that evaluates to an appropriate integer when naming an index variable of an array. Because as I said earlier, that I as an index or subscript should be an integer. This is an example. Now suppose the value of point is equal to 2, and now inside the array we are referring to location 2 plus 3, which is 5. So we are saving 32 into location 5, and we are printing the same element using the same expression, which is point plus 3. Finally, when you write the name of the array followed by square brackets with an index, altogether is referring to an index variable. Or sometimes we call it an array element or subscripted variable. In this case, the system will treat it as an ordinary variable. So each index variable can be used just like any other variable. So you can increment it, you can use it in if statement, you can print it, you can pass it into a method, and so on. For some examples of statements that are allowed in Java to refer index variables, we can assign single values to indexed variables. Also, we can print index variables using a print statement. Also, we can reference individual elements of index variables and do some kind of arithmetic calculations. For example, in this statement, we are taking the value, the index variable at index minus 1. If index is 4 and 4 minus 1 is 3, so we are referring to the index variable at location 3. We add 3 into it and we save it into the index variable that is at location 4. In this writing now, we are writing temperature index plus 2 plus a plus. We are referring to the index variable that is at location 6. Why? Because the expression has an index 4 plus 2 is 6. We are referring to the index element at location 6. We take its value and we increment it by 1. Finally, we are adding a number to the index variable at location 4. So this is a statement that accumulates the value of num to the value of the index variable at location